Good morning, everyone. I just need you all to know that it is totally and unequivocally Lance McQuitty's fault that I wound up 3 weeks ago stuck at my doctor's office without any battery power to get home. Let me explain myself. First of all, by the way, if you didn't get a chance to listen to Lance's first lesson this morning, go home this week and listen to it online. If you missed it, you missed something really special. He did an amazing job, and I hope we all agree with that. But Lance, yeah, I got beat with you, man. Because he showed up at my house like 3 years ago, two and a half years ago, in his e-Golf, his Volkswagen electric car, when I did not have a vehicle. And he tempted me. It was Lance who made me do it, and I went and bought my own electric car. And so far to this point, it's been amazing. I've been able to drive everywhere I needed to go. I have plenty of charge. I have a charger in my garage at home. I can go home and charge it, plug it in. Everything's great. It was wonderful. I get up 3 weeks ago on Monday morning to go to the doctor to have my yearly physical, and I get in my car, and it says I have 9 miles of range. Oops. And I was like, well, good thing the doctor's only 5 miles away. So I went to the doctor. And I brought my backup charger, and I brought a battery pack with me. So I thought I was all clever. I was gonna charge my car in the parking lot while I was in the doctor. Well, I get out there, and I'm plugging it all in and getting everything set up, and I realize the charger, my backup charger, is broken. Oops. And so now I'm at the doctor having my yearly physical. They're taking my blood pressure, and I'm already stressed out, and I know that I am not going to be able to make it anywhere after this trip. I get out of the doctor, I go and I look at my current battery level, how many miles I can drive. I can drive 0 miles. That was it. The car sat in the doctor's office, and I Ubered to work. It was great. But I say all this to say that I broke my cardinal rule. And my cardinal rule, I have heard working alongside military members for years and years. This has been a cardinal rule I've had for a very long time, and the cardinal rule is this: 2 is 1, 1 is none. You ever heard that? 2 is 1, 1 is none. Basically what it means is I needed a backup. And what had happened 3 months ago was my primary charger failed, so I was using my backup. And the backup that I had brought out to the doctor's office to try to use was broken. My backup was broken. 2 is 1, 1 is none. Are you the kind of person, just starting out this lesson, think about yourself. Are you the kind of person who needs a backup? Are you the kind of person who has to have a backup? You've got to have a backup plan. You have to have a backup device to back up the other thing. You don't feel good unless you've got 17 copies of your photos in all kinds of different places in a fireproof box, in all sorts of other things, just so that in case something happens, you are covered. Or are you the kind of person who flies by the seat of their pants and just hopes things work out? And you don't care about a backup because, oh, well, everything will be fine. I think there are 2 kinds of people in this world, people who believe in backups and people who don't. Which one are you? Because on that day, where I expected to be able to rely on my backup failed, and where was I? I was Ubering to work, and it was embarrassing. And it's Lance McQuitty's fault. So I say all that to say that we are the kind of people who need a backup. We are the kind of people who need to rely on a backup. And we're designed that way. And that leads us to our scripture reading that Rick read for us this morning from Mark chapter 6. If you have a Bible, please turn with me to Mark 6. This is a story that really isn't focused too much on backups, except for the fact that it is, when Jesus is sending out his disciples, his 12 apostles. In other accounts, this talks about him sending out the 70 or the 72. This may very well have been many people Jesus was sending out to go talk to people about him. And how did he send them? he called the 12 and began to send them out 2 by 2. He sent them in pairs. He sent them with a backup. Why did Jesus send them out with a backup? Because Jesus knows that there is wisdom in companionship. Jesus knows there is wisdom in having a friend. There's wisdom in the 2 by 2. Because 2 is 1 and 1 is none. Now, of course, there's lots of other reasons for this. In the old law, you were not supposed to believe the witness or the testimony of somebody unless they had somebody to corroborate that testimony. So that may very well have been a great reason why Jesus was sending out 2 disciples together so that they could both corroborate each other's stories. But I think so much more than that, what a lonely thing to do if you were just going out by yourself. Not only does Jesus send out the apostles here 2 by 2, but when Paul decides to go out on his missionary journeys in the book of Acts, he doesn't just go alone. No, he takes Barnabas with him, or Silas. He takes all kinds of other people. He's got partners in the work. He goes out 2 by 2. Because 2 is 1, and 1 is none. Jesus understands here the importance of friendship. What I want us to do for a few weeks is to talk about the importance of friendship. I want us to talk about what it means to be a friend. I want to talk about why it's important for us to be a good friend ourselves, to look for good friends. I want us to see that God's design for us, His intention for us, is to partner alongside other people so that we can do the work more effectively. Are we on the same page? It's a really simple concept, and maybe this is just real basic stuff for you, but I think this is really important for us when we start thinking about ourselves as a good friend, when we start looking for other people who can join us in the work that we're doing, because 2 by 2 Jesus sent his disciples out, and I believe we are not meant to be alone in our work. So I'm going to call this little tiny series that we're going to do 2 by 2. All these lessons are going to have to do with this 2 by 2 nature of the work that we do, our friendship with each other, and this lesson I'm calling 2 is 1, 1 is none. Because we need a backup. There's wisdom in having a backup. And so let's go and look at some more wisdom literature. I'd like to go look at 4 different proverbs, 4 different wise sayings that help us really understand the importance of friendship. 4 wise sayings that are going to really hopefully clarify some questions we might have, get us all on the same page, just really getting us to understand that we are not an island unto ourselves, and if we don't have someone to back us up, it's going to be a bad day. So if you're on board with me, let's go to Ecclesiastes chapter 4. I said we were going to look at some Proverbs, and now I'm going to Ecclesiastes, but I hope you'll forgive me. Ecclesiastes chapter 4 is a proverb. This is a wise saying by the wisest man who walked the earth, save Jesus himself, Solomon. This is Solomon's great search for really the meaning of life, and so in his search, he does talk about the meaning of friendship and how important friendship is. Ecclesiastes 4. Let's look at verse 9. Again, none of these verses are going to be groundbreaking. By the way, if you've studied the Bible for like 5 minutes, you've probably stumbled across these verses. But just see this all kind of painting a tapestry together and how these verses work together. And maybe this will help convince you of the need for friendship. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 9, the wise writer says, 2 are better than 1, because they have a good reward for their toil. Or if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, and has not another to lift him up. Again, if 2 lie together, they keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, 2 will withstand him. A 3-fold cord is not quickly broken. Again, you could probably recite that entire verse if you've been a Bible student for any length of time. 2 are better than 1. Don't you see that exactly mimicking this idea that we were talking about. Why did Jesus send out his disciples 2 by 2? Because 2 are better than 1. 2 is 1. 1 is none. 2 has a lot of value. Mary Teresa Boyangiu said, "I can do what you cannot. You can do what I cannot. Together, we can do great things." And that is exactly what this verse is saying. You have a skill set that I don't have. And I have a skill set that you don't have. And when we combine our forces together, we can do amazing things. We can do great things together because 2 are better than 1. We have each other there to lift each other up. We have each other there to keep each other warm. And we have each other there to defend the other one. Who's going to withstand these 2 who stand together? And oh, by the way, if 2 aren't enough, how about 3? He goes on to say here at the end, a threefold cord is not quickly broken. It's powerful imagery. And the wise writer needs us to understand that having a companion is absolutely important, and that's the big idea in this lesson today. The big idea is that you cannot deny the importance of having a friend. I'm just going to say this to answer any questions for somebody who might be saying, well, Bryan, duh. Of course, this is the most obvious lesson you've ever heard. Except for if you're somebody who struggles to find a friend. Except for if you're somebody who does not yet have somebody that you're close to. If you've ever been in that position, verses like this feel lofty. They feel on the horizon, like maybe someday I'll have a friend like this. If you're a certain type of person, this verse might feel aspirational, whereas if you're another type of person, it might just be like, well, yeah, of course. Duh. Let's see the value in friendship, because friendship is absolutely important. It's absolutely critical for us to have these relationships. Why, oh, by the way, when Adam was created, why was he looking around at everything and saying, I need a friend? Why did God say, you need a companion? I'm going to create someone for you. I mean, we could have a whole lesson about marriage and companionship as part of this, and that would be appropriate. But it's not good for man to be alone. And so if you are alone, understand that having somebody there to back you up is a good thing, is something to be focusing on. So that's the first proverb, and I hope that's really helpful. But Proverbs 17, let's actually go to the Proverbs now. Proverbs 17 for our second proverb that we're going to consider here. Proverbs 17, verse 17, the wise writer says this, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. So a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. There's a sister of our group, and I'm not going to name her. I'm just going to shout out her podcast that she just started up recently. She kicked off a podcast in January. A couple episodes into it. I'm loving it, by the way. And if you haven't checked it out, it's called Her Strength in Him. Go Google search it. Go on Spotify and look it up on there. Go listen to it. If you need a link for it, just let me know, and I'll give it to you, or other people can too. In this podcast, this dear sister of ours, who's very intentional about the way that she lives her life and her goal setting and the things that motivate her, she was talking about how, all of these Bible verses and all of the motivation that she has from Scripture to be doing important and powerful work in her life. And she talked about having a theme for the year. She talked about having a word that drives her thinking for this year. And I'm not going to talk about her word, but as I was listening to her, it actually made me think about sharing with you my word for this year. So that's sort of a roundabout way of getting you to my word for the year. And my word this year is the year of the shield. 2024 for Bryan Schiele is the year of the shield. That means that this year I'm going to be focusing on developing my faith, making the shield of my faith, as we read about in Ephesians, stronger. That means this year I'm going to be setting very clear boundaries and making sure that I stick to those boundaries for my own health and for the sake of the work that I do. But one of the things that ties into this lesson is the idea of how a shield interlocks with the shields of those around you. You notice this about shields. You notice this about that a shield is not just there to protect you, but it's there to protect those around you. It's there to protect your friends in times of adversity. It reminds me of Spartan warriors. Do you remember you ever heard the phrase that is used of Spartan warriors about their shield? You're either going to return with your shield or on it. Meaning that you could lose your breastplate, you could lose your helmet as a Spartan warrior and return back home, and they just give you another one and say, oh, it's okay, no big deal. But if you lost your shield, if you came back from battle without your shield, there are many reports out there that people were booted out of citizenship from that society then because they lost their shield. Losing your shield lost you your citizenship. Why? Because the shield was effective for protecting other people, not just you. And as this verse is talking about, our shields have the ability to extend around other people. If you're not a super old Spartan nerd like that, if you're a Star Trek watcher and you ever heard Captain Picard extend the shields around another ship nearby, now I got you. Anybody who was all on board with Lance's lesson just got that reference. If you ever remember that extending the shields around a ship around you, that's this idea. A friend loves at all times. A brother is born for adversity. In times of difficulty and struggle and attack, am I using my connections with other people to protect them? And are they able to do that for me? There is wisdom in having somebody there to back you up. And there's wisdom in being able to back other people up. And for me, that's something I really want to focus on this year. I want to focus on being a better friend, which really is the reason why we're having this lesson. This is sort of self-serving, I suppose. I'm really talking to me. And so if you're going to find any value in listening to these things, well, then that's great. Because I think I need to work on this myself, being a better friend, being somebody who steps in and protects other people. And it's something that I'm focused on. But the third proverb, I think, is the natural extension of some of these conversations. The third proverb is in Proverbs 18, verse 24. And before we read it, I just want to talk about the problem. If you ever have something that's good, if maybe you're like me in this way, if you ever have something that's good, what is the natural extension of realizing that it's good? Then I need to have more of that thing. If 1 is good, then 2 is better. If 2 is better, 3 is better. How about I just have 1,000 friends? Right? If we're talking about friendship and being a companion and having people there to back us up, well, why don't I just have 1,000 friends? Verse 24 of Proverbs 18 says, a man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. We'll talk about this in this little series, but friendship gets diluted quickly. A man of many companions may come to ruin. And a lot of young people struggle with this. I know I struggled with this for a long time, thinking that a social media presence with hundreds and thousands of followers was some big thing. Oh, look at how many friends I have online. Well, they're not your friends. They're not your true friends. They're not going to stick closer than a brother, most of those people. Many of us will probably have a very core, select group of people who connect with us, who know us deeply, and that might only be 1 or 2 or 3, maybe 4 or 5, people in our super inner circle who know us that deeply. And there may be more on the periphery of those people who are also considered our friends, but they may not be as connected to us, as deeply, intimately involved in our life. Do you see this in your own life? I mean, look around. We're in a room of some number of almost 150, 200 people in this room. Is every single person in this room deeply, 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 intimately connected to you? Or are some of the people in this room on the periphery? Find a brother who sticks close to you. Find a friend who is so close to you that they might as well be your brother. Make sure you're cultivating at least one unique relationship like this. And make sure you're being this way for at least one other person. This is basically what Jesus exemplified in his own life. And we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail in further lessons. But you know how Jesus was with his 12 disciples. But then aside from that, he had hundreds, maybe dozens and hundreds of followers who followed him around. How many people did he take with him to the garden to pray? How many people did he take with him to the mountain of transfiguration? How many people in the book of John did it say that Jesus loved? The disciple that Jesus loved? There was only one disciple who was specifically called out in that way. There is nothing wrong with having an inner circle. There's nothing wrong with having people who are close to us. And there's nothing wrong with having people on the periphery. But let's be very clear that we are not trying to just have all of our relationships be surface-scratching, distant relationships. Make sure you're investing in at least one close and deep, meaningful relationship and connection. And I think we see that here in this verse. So let's go in our final proverb to Proverbs 22. Proverbs 22, verse 24. This will be the last one we'll consider. So we've sort of been addressing a variety of different arguments here, different thought processes, but hopefully you're seeing the wisdom in friendship and how friendship is something that we should invest ourselves in. But then he goes on to talk about the quality, not just the quantity, but the quality of our friends. He says in verse 24 of Proverbs 22, "Make no friendship with a man given to anger, nor go with a wrathful man, lest you learn his ways and entangle yourself in a snare." It matters who you're friends with. There are a lot of people in your life, and this is a lesson I learned and am still learning in my own life as a young person and even as a 40-year-old something or other. Sometimes the people who you let close to you are bad for you. Do you agree with that? Can you think of somebody in your life that you've allowed close to you who's bad for you? The wise writer here is saying, don't be friends with people who are like that. Don't be friends who are people who are angry or wrathful, lest you become like them. You can just hear the admonition of Paul in 1 Corinthians about the leaven that comes in and infects your life. Beware of those people who come in and who can have an impact. Beware of your companions and their effect on your stand for the truth. And in all those times in Corinthians, when he was talking about those people, he wasn't talking about those people outside the walls. He was talking about the people inside the walls who are negative influences on us. Beware of people who you allow close to you who don't lead you to positive growth in the Lord. Beware of those people who lead you to have negative and angry, wrathful kinds of feelings. Beware of those people and watch out, because who we're friends with matters. So we balance all of these things together and we say, okay, well, I need to be careful about who my friends are. I need to develop a serious, deep connection with somebody as a friend. I need to see that friendship is valuable. And I need to be willing to tough it out and stick it out with my friends so that we can get to places we could never go on our own. So do we see that from the wisdom literature here? Do we see the power of friendship? And what I want to ask you, what I want to leave us all with thinking about this week, Maybe this is a discussion you can have with your friend. Ask each other this question: what obstacle stands between you and having this kind of relationship with a friend? What is keeping you from having this kind of deep, meaningful connection with someone? Is there something standing in your way that you need to take care of, you need to remove? For myself, and I won't get too deep into it, but I can think of Elijah from 1 Kings 19, when Elijah goes off to hole himself off in a cave, and he thinks he's all alone. He thinks he's the only one left. And he goes into this pit of depression thinking that he's all by himself and everyone's out to get him. I don't know if you've ever been there. I've been there. And when God comes to Elijah, God's first job for Elijah to understand is, guess what? You're not alone. There's 7,000 more people just like you. Now get out of the cave and go find a friend with a similar name as you and work together with them. 2 is 1. 1 is none. For me, sometimes it's just getting past what I've convinced myself of. That I've convinced myself that there's no one else who really wants to be my friend. There's no one else who has the time to be my friend. Everybody's so busy. We all live so far away. There's so many things going on. Excuse after excuse after excuse. What's standing in your way of being a good friend for somebody, a friend who sticks closer than a brother? And whatever that is, I hope and I pray that the Lord will help you take that away. And so I'll leave you with one challenge this week. Maybe it's something you can do. Maybe it's something you can journal about. I've said, I'm a big fan of journaling. I'm a big fan of writing things down, goal setting and planning and that kind of thing. If you're the same way, here's a practical verb you can do this week to help maybe hit this lesson home. And the challenge is this. Have you ever heard of a social audit? I've done this. It's scary, so buckle up. You basically sit down every night and you write down a list of all the people you talk to. All the people you talk to throughout the day. And next to their name, you put a plus or a minus. If for a plus, they were encouraging to you, they were pushing you, they were helping you to grow, you put a plus next to their name. And if these people were that sort of way that we were reading about there in that last proverb we consider, they were taking from you, they were leading you into negative places emotionally, put a minus next to their name. This is not an overly judgmental kind of activity. You're not going to share this with anybody. This is going to be for you. So that you start to get a sense for who are the people who could be my companions? Who are the people I can let into my inner circle? Who are the people I trust, who love me and who have my best interest at heart? And you may very well find a Greg +++, or a Sherilyn +++. And I'm not going to use names, but on the other side of this, the activity is also helpful for yourself, to ask yourself, am I a Bryan ++? Or am I a Bryan minus? That activity for me, when I did it, was incredibly helpful because I realized there are times where I am not the best friend that I can be. And so for all of us, we need to understand that our connection with others is so important. It's not just a throwaway thing. It's not just something we relegate to, oh, well, that would be nice for me to work on someday. No, our love for other people is paramount in our journey with the Lord. Our connection with other people is paramount in getting to heaven because 2 is 1 and 1 is none. May God bless us with the kinds of relationships that only He can provide us. And if you're somebody who is looking for that kind of relationship, look around. There are people who you can befriend. There are people who you can connect to in this room right now. But if you're not yet connected with Jesus, if you're not yet a servant of the King, if you are not a friend of His, you can have no better friend than the one who gave His life for you on the cross. If there's anything we can do this morning to help you give your life to Him and start that journey with Him, please come. While together we stand and sing.